Recorded live from the John Pacino studio inside of High Tech High School in Secaucus, New Jersey. This is the High Tech Interview Show on WHIT Podcasting. Call and join the conversation at 201-589-0321. I'm your host, Kanan, and now host, announcer, same thing. It's all the same here. I'm Kanan, and now Jose.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the interview show here. Every single week, we got a new one for you guys. I'm here with my co-hosts, Kanan, Jade, Maddie, and behind the scenes, we got Olivia working back there. We got Shah, Mr. DePiro. But today, we have not only a lovely guest, but also our new film teacher, Miss Cabrera, coming in for the first time for an episode. Awesome. But who do we have today?
Oh, this is Toren Reaves from Adobe. I'm super grateful to be here, and I'm really excited to get the conversation going.
That's awesome. Today's going to be a loaded show. We got a lot for you guys. And sir, what do you do at Adobe?
So I do a lot of things. I guess my official title is Adobe Express Evangelist and Community Advocate. So basically, wherever I see people creating, I'm there to promote and see how I can help out. It takes a lot of different forms because there are a lot of different creatives. But in this case, it was coming to visit your school and just kind of listening to what you guys have to say and hopefully showing some stuff that you guys find interesting and useful. That's
awesome. And Ms. Cabrera, I want to ask you, how did we get him here today?
I went to an Adobe event. It was content creation for small business owners. I do a lot of freelance work on the side for small businesses. And when I heard about Adobe Express through our collaboration and the competition that our students are in, which is called the Edit, I wanted to check it out and to see what we could do, what the platform does, how to use it, how I can use it as a tool for my freelance work. So I met you there.
Yeah.
And afterwards I came right up to you and I was like, hey, my students are using this platform in school. Would you be interested in coming in and speaking to our students? And here we are today.
That's awesome. Anybody got open up the floor for some questions here?
Is Express like your expertise, or do you like everything? Like, how involved are you with all of Adobe's apps?
Yeah,
it's a great question. Yeah, I think my expertise, it's yes to all of it. For Adobe Express, I think it's a really great hub, no matter what your skill experience is. Like if you're, somebody who's been a pro designer for 10 years, working at an ad agency, I think that there's actually a really good case used for Adobe Express. I think it's a very approachable application, so you don't have to have 10 years of experience designing to get something out of it. Like if it's just day one for you, there's something there. There's a lot there for you. So like whatever you're bringing to it, there's something there for you. So I kind of have to be able to speak to all those different case uses. And so it helps a lot if I have an expertise with, Illustrator or Premiere Pro or Photoshop or Lightroom, and just kind of seeing how those different applications can be utilized best within Express and then vice versa. So in my day-to-day, I use all the apps pretty much in my workflows.
Yeah, I have a question. So as we know, Adobe Express is kind of like a broad, I guess, network for different kinds of editing, whether it's video and photography.
Mm-hmm.
What is your specialty and what apps do you use based on that?
Yeah, so for me, my specialty, I think, would be photography. But I got my start working with apparel brands. And because I had my own little agency of one person, I was designing the apparel that I would end up doing the lifestyle photography for, which I would end up modeling myself. And then I would take the photography of the designs that I designed, and I would build out a campaign, and then I would push that to social. So for me, it's always been one thing, from top of the funnel, ideation to executing and out in the wild. It all feels like one project. So it's very hard for me to kind of segment out I'm a video expert or I'm a photography expert.
Right.
I've always been just trying to take a feeling that I had and turn it into apparel and then share that with people online. And so whatever tools I stumble through during that process just kind of feels really natural. But when I have to try to figure out what's the case use for an Express in my workflow, in a practical sense, it's usually that last stop just to kind of see it in the right aspect ratio, and you can preview before you push the live. And so I'm the kind of creative where it has to be done for me to know if I like it or not.
Yeah.
So I've spent hours, hundreds of hours on projects before. And then in some cases I've pushed things live and been I actually don't like this, and then just deleted it. And so Express saves me from having to post it live. so I can like use the previewer for that. But just like sharing the social, like I think that's the most common case use for me, but everybody comes to it with something different. Like I know some people just need a flyer and they'll use a template, or some people have a very specific need and they'll use text to template where they have like AI generate a template for them and then they populate it with their own creative, or they'll generate their own creative right there in app. It does so many things that it's really hard to kind of like pigeonhole into one sort of view. But for me, it's like that last stop before I go live.
I have been planning to make my own website, so if you guys can make more templates for that, that would be so
You-
great.
you
That
can
would
make
be
your
so
own template.
swell.
Yeah.
That would be
Swell,
so
actually.
swell.
You can make your own template. So like you could type into the text to template generator, be like, I want a website for this product, and it will give you a template like just using AI. Which
That's
is pretty
so
awesome.
cool.
Oh, don't.
I
fret.
did not know
I will
that.
have a website up by summer.
Yeah.
Don't you worry.
Yeah.
Don't you fret.
By sunrise.
By sunrise,
By
actually. Give me a couple
sunrise, it will
hours.
happen.
No, it's great for stuff like that, where it's like if you have a really niche need, and like when I first started doing any sort of designs, like it was just like that, like just a lot of template stuff, and like I would know it when I saw it. And so I would like find something that I thought was cool, like if it spoke to me in any way, and then I would just kind of like go, okay, how can I put my own spin on this? And then I usually designed away from what that original source was, like 100%. It just got me thinking. And so I got a little bit more streamlined, a little bit better at starting further down that creative funnel, where now I don't launch from like a template that much anymore.
Right.
But there are plenty of mornings where I'll just boot up Express just to see what's new in there. Go, okay, like what would be my spin on these sort of conventions to design or expressing yourself.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So anybody can use Adobe Express.
Anybody can use it. Yeah. I think it's ubiquity amongst people who are just getting started is a little bit more apparent. But again, like I worked at like a lot of ad agencies, and you'd be shocked at like how siloed the different departments are. So like the people who do the graphic design are almost never the people who are pushing the creative live on the social. And so like the disconnect between those departments can lead to a lot of friction. And what I love Express for in that case use is like you could share your library in like Adobe Creative Cloud and have all your graphics and templates in Express, so anybody in your team could access them, and like you can have like a brand guideline with brand colors and brand fonts. So like there's that synergy with having like your brand guidelines followed like to the T. So like you don't need the graphic designer to have to like check and approve of all the assets before they go live. The people who are flighting it, typically the PR team, have like all those things kind of given to them already, so that they can mix and match on the fly, but still stay within like those strict brand guidelines, because some brands do not play. Like you can't have the wrong hex code of their colors whatsoever, especially like colleges. I did a project with LSU one time, and like they had to like turn two keys at the same time just to let me know what font they use, like because it's a proprietary font that they own, and so I wasn't allowed to access it, so I had to do everything other than use their font. So yeah, like so some brands are really strict about that. Like me and my brand, like I love seeing what people do with it, but when you're working with brands like that are very strict, you could lose a client for having literally like the wrong shade of purple by like one integer in the hex code. So if you have a graphic designer who's swapping assets back and forth all day, the more times you do that, I think the likelihood that something gets mixed up kind of increases. And so to have Express as like a tool where you're cutting down on the number of exports and imports and re-uploads and downloads, I just think kind of cuts the likelihood that you make a mistake down quite a bit.
No, yeah, 100%. I definitely understand, because I also started with photography. So I've worked with Lightroom, I've worked with Photoshop, I work with Adobe Express, Photoshop Express specifically. And that's honestly part of the reason why I like using Apple products, because I like that I can share all of my stuff that I'm working on any device, and it can just transfer in. It's the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing with Adobe. It's nice that I can, draw something in. I can sketch something on my iPad, and then boom, I go on my laptop to actually input some footage, and it's there. I already have everything that I need. So I completely understand. It's definitely useful. It's definitely time saving. And it also just makes you more interested in what you're doing, because it's like, okay, like I know this is going to still be, I know it's going to be certain. I know it's going to be the way that I want it, no matter how I decide I want that. So it's nice. It's reassuring. Really.
Yeah. I always tell people, like, imagine like you go out and take photos for your social media, but you have a complete stranger post them.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, well, okay, hold on. Like, they may not crop this the way that I would crop this, or color grade it the way that I would, or put the caption I would want. And that's the way a lot of like actual like ad agencies operate, where like the people creating the creative are like never actually have like the final touch before it goes live. And so like that's where you get those little mix-ups. And like I had that heartbreak a million times working with brands where I would spend forever like making sure the logo was like right where I wanted it to be, like the photo was cropped a certain way, and then when I saw the client post it live, it was cropped just like in a completely different way. It would kill me. Like I spent forever making this look a certain way, and then now it's all gone because somebody just didn't know how to just press like the little arrow buttons before posting on Instagram. So yeah.
So real.
I think like a great feature that Adobe Express has is the brands. Like it has a tab where you can have brand kits.
Yeah.
So you can upload the logo, their color scheme, and it's all in one location. So you don't have to go into your desktop, into a folder, bring it into the platform. You can just know what you're working on right away, and then upload the logo, change the colors, and have it all in one location. It makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, it's awesome, and that you can have more than one brand now is great. I have a brand library now that I'm working on where it's every asset I ever created on like my own behalf since I started to right now, so that anybody can access it and like use the source files and see like what my naming conventions were, the color codes that I had. Because I know for a lot of creatives just getting started, like you can feel like the assets that you have access to, like are just kind of, if they're not from like a certain place, you can feel some type of way about it. And so to kind of help people feel a little bit more encouraged to just create, like take the tools that I've made and make them your own. And even just like in the naming conventions, like when I first started, I would download like those templates from like Adobe stock. I'm like, oh, here's like a template for a pair of shorts. And you would see just how things were organized, how to use the app. And so it's like, oh, like if somebody can learn from how I've constructed files, like how the app can be used, not necessarily like the way to use it, but a way to use it. That's something that I super encourage. And so you can do all that in like a brand library and just make it public, which is what I'm in the process of doing now.
That's really cool.
That's awesome. And when you spoke to us earlier, you kind of told us about like your story, and it was an interesting one because in 2010 you mentioned that you graduated college, and I just want you to go into depth and how did you get to where you're at today with Adobe?
Oh yeah, so whenever anybody asks me like how'd you get hired by Adobe, I just say like I have no idea. I really don't know. But they've been pretty upfront and saying like everybody who's on this team is here for a reason, and I think they kind of leave it up to you to figure out what that exact reason is. And I think for me it's conversations like this, like just being able to come see you guys and see the work that you're doing, let you know like you guys are light years ahead of where I think I'm at even now, and encouraging you guys to kind of keep moving forward. And that's the sort of stuff that I think is why I'm here at Adobe right now. I got my start, like you said, in 2010 when I graduated. There were just no jobs, and so I was homeless for a bit. Then I fought pro MMA for a while, and I still train every day. Between boxing and jiu-jitsu and MMA, like I'm the old guy in the gym now, which is super weird. Like I remember just being like a 22-year-old who could just do it 3 times in one day, like just training nonstop and feel good to go. And now I'm 36. It's like, okay, I might need 2 days to ice these knees.
Wow.
It's a wild transition. But I think it gives me a lot of clarity, and it's, martial arts are kind of the prism through which I view everything, even art. Like for me, it just made so much sense. If I put in the work, I get my hand raised. If I outtrained my opponent, then I felt confident in, going for this job. I knew that it was impossible to have outworked me because I couldn't give anything else to what I'm doing in a day-to-day process. And so if I know that there's not one drop left of me to give to whatever it is I'm doing professionally, then who else across from me could really say the same thing? And so I felt very confident going into interviews that I was going to land this job, which was a weird way to feel, going for something that was so out of my depth. I didn't start until 2010, or excuse me, until 2020 when COVID hit. That was the first time I downloaded Creative Cloud, and I did my first campaign with, my smartphone and Lightroom on mobile.
Yeah.
And then that campaign took off. Like I remember we used to track something called like return on ad spend. So like for every dollar you spend on advertising, how many dollars you get back in revenue. And when I was working campaigns before without having a creative input, like the highest I'd ever seen is like a 3, maybe a 4. So for every dollar we spend on advertising, we get $4 back. And when I finally had carte blanche autonomy to run my own campaign with like my own photography even though I took it with my cell phone and used Lightroom on mobile to edit it. I just knew that I had a sauce that like nobody else in Rochester had. And so I got the campaign numbers back. We had a return ad spend of 13. And so I reached out to Facebook and I was like, I think your reporting's broken. They're like, yeah, it must be. And so they got back to me 2 weeks later and they're like, no, everything is running correctly. Like whatever you're doing, like keep doing it. And so I was able to reverse engineer the success of that one campaign. And by the end of that summer, I had maybe a dozen clients internationally that I was doing everything from designing products with their lead sponsored athlete to modeling myself or doing all the photography and running the back end stuff on the website, doing email campaigns. Like I was doing everything. And so I just didn't sleep. But it was like I said with MMA, it's like I know that if I'm putting in 110% and there's nothing left in the tank by the time I go to sleep, I'm going to get ahead, just right. Like with fighting. And so I think it was that kind of drive that made it much more easy for me to kind of get ahead in such a short amount of time.
Now you mentioned your MMA career, and I see the cauliflower ear. How was that period in your life for you?
To me, that period's still ongoing. I wouldn't be able to do what I do today if I didn't have that as like a realignment on like a daily basis. Nothing humbles you more quickly than stepping into the gym and just going, okay, like today there's a pro boxer here. I'm about to get pieced up. And they would always say like, go get that medicine. Like whenever a coach says that, you're about to have a bad day. Like, oh, here comes Toren. He's going to get that medicine today. But the thing about medicine is like, it doesn't taste good, but it always makes you better. And so like, there have been so many times where I walked in a little too floaty into the gym and then left like, ready to just kind of sit down and think about my whole existence. Like, man, what am I doing this for? There's a gym not too far from here, Marcelo Garcia's, which is like the greatest jiu-jitsu gym on the planet. It's like right here in New York City. And the very first time I went there as like a purple belt and there was a brown belt there. And he was telling me to like stay seated, like when we were sparring. And so I said, keep me there, bro. And it was the worst decision ever because like for the next 7 minutes, he like ragdolled me all over. And I remember sitting on the stairs outside afterwards thinking like, bro, I gotta come correct for the rest of my life. I'm gonna get humbled like that in a really rough way if I don't. And so like having like little reminders like that to stay grounded, I think are huge, and it just gives you a lot of confidence. So it's like, okay, like I can go into any interview and feel, I'm not stepping into a cage. Like there's nothing that's going to happen here that's worse than, having somebody drop a pin and saying, okay, like good luck.
Oh yeah,
was most of your So I'm assuming most of your like what is like self-taught.
All
like,
of it.
So how was that? Like, did you go on like YouTube or something and find tutorials, or did you just start messing around with the apps until like you found what worked for you?
So one thing when I started and I was like working with clients, I promised myself I'd never say no to something because it was the first time I'd been asked to do it. Because at that point I hadn't done anything, so it'd be a really short list of things I'd say yes to. And so I learned a lot just from looking. Like I knew what I liked. It was a matter of like, how do I get this there?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it was just knowing what things were called. And so like when I work with students now, I kind of act as like a glossary of terms where like, I remember I spent forever Googling like, what's it called when the picture's in the circle, but it's not outside the circle. And then you go, okay, what's a clipping mask? And then once you learn what it's called, doing it takes 2 seconds. And so like that was really like the big hurdle for me, was learning the rhetoric that's used amongst designers. Because I will just call stuff the stupidest things, like whatsoever. Just like the dumbest stuff. Like, oh, how do I make the letters floaty? It's like, oh, a drop shadow. Like that's, so I kind of came into it like my own speech. But once I got past that hurdle, life was much, much easier. But, where I'm from, there are more ad agencies in Rochester than there are Black men employed by them combined. So right now, today, there are 3 men of color who work at all the ad agencies in Rochester combined, and not one of them does anything creative.
Wow.
And the work reflects that. So the kind of content that's being produced is extremely homogenous. And I knew, like, when I came out of the gates kind of just flying, like I started with a Nipsey Hussle song over Power Rangers footage in a friend of mine who was the WBO middleweight boxing champion. So I must have seemed like an alien at the time, but it's just so different relative to what everybody else was doing, which was like this perpetual like Kaufman's ad that we were living in the landscape. And so I knew that if I spoke to things that were interesting to me in a way that I found interesting, I'd at least be different. And in marketing,
Right.
that's 90% of what the job is. It's like you're tasked with making your clients, highlighting the things that make them different and why somebody would buy them over their competitors.
Yeah.
And so if you can't do that with your own work and make your own work stand out, then how are you servicing these clients? And so I just knew like I'm going to tap into the stuff that I like. And, you know, it was 90s JRPGs on the PlayStation 1 and, you know, old like anime AMVs from like the early 2000s, like Linkin Park over Dragon Ball Z stuff. Like I was like always fascinated
I
by
know
like
what
that
you're
stuff.
talking about.
Yeah,
too.
I was
That's
always
crazy. That's even crazier.
Yeah, so I was,
I've seen it all.
I know exactly what he's
yeah,
talking
like I've got the
about.
Gundam t-shirt on today. It's so
Yeah.
funny. Like
That
I came
was
to
the
talk
first
to
thing I
stepped in.
First thing I noticed. Yeah.
I told my wife I was going to go talk to students, and she goes, "Okay, well, you're probably going to go dress like one." And so here I am. Yeah, just you know. But this was the stuff that like was completely devoid of the local scene, and that's why I stood out so much. But it didn't come from a place that was contrived. This was the stuff I genuinely found interested and wanted to see reflected in the work that I was telling. And so that was really it. Just using the stuff that I found dope to inform where I went creatively. And sometimes I would look at a picture and I go, okay, how can I replicate this one for one? And then you would learn like, oh man, like even the dumbest stuff, there's so much artistry to it. It's so hard to replicate something. And then I got that out of my system where I was so frustrated by that process. I go, okay, the thing that I'm looking at that inspires me already exists. I'll never do a better job at that than that thing does.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just take what that feeling gives me, like that compulsion to create, and I'll just go make stuff. Like whatever it is, whatever form that takes, that's enough. It doesn't have to look like the thing that inspired me. And I think that some people, you'll see them still struggle with that throughout their entire career, but I got over that hurdle real quick.
Like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
okay to be different.
Yeah.
It's actually better to be different.
It's much better
like,
to be now. Yeah. I would say that it would behoove you to be different in a way that's authentic, because right now there's so much stuff that's being put in front of you on a daily basis. Like for me, it's not the number of likes you get. The only metric that I personally care about is how many times I have like somebody save my work.
Yeah.
Because when you have like a constant deluge of stuff, the idea that somebody wants to spend more time with what I'm making as opposed to what's new and constantly being put in front of them, to me, it's like, wow, that's the compliment. Like you can kind of like things in passing, but to save something and say, no, I'm going to come back to this and spend more time with it. To me, that's the mark of me kind of moving in the right direction. So whenever I get those little saves, I'm like, oh, okay, like word. Like, all right.
Oh, yeah.
I'm doing something
genuinely.
right.
Yeah, I'm doing something right.
Saves
I'm about
and
to say-
shares.
I'm about to say that you were talking about earlier, just not knowing what the thing means right now. So
Oh
I
my
feel like
God, no.
because we have this talk all this time when we're editing. We're just like, I don't know how.
I don't know what this is called. Yeah,
It's
what's this
actually
effect
so
called?
funny because you were talking about Premiere Pro and just working with the Premiere,
Yeah.
and I hate Premiere. I'm gonna be completely
Yeah, well,
honest.
what don't you like
because
about it?
I'm confused.
Yeah.
It just confuses me. I know how to do these things. I know what this is called. I know what that is called. I go to Premiere. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what I'm looking for.
Like,
I don't know
like
the
where
name
to
of this.
find
I don't know.
things?
Yeah,
Not
it's
only
like-
where to find it, but the names of things.
Yeah, it's like when
feel
I learn that one tool, I know it forever, and I will only do that one
yeah.
thing with confidence.
100%. And then I figure out there's another button that's attached to it and I can do something else. And it's like, oh my God, this is like world ending, but it takes me like 6 months to get that
Yeah.
far.
No, one thing I had to learn in Premiere and all the apps is like the little help, like magnifying glass thing.
Mhm.
I avoided that like the plague until I started working
Yeah.
there. And then when I like finally started working at Adobe and I type something in, it really does just bring you right to the thing that you were looking for. Like, so
Right
I would
now,
I would
right
lean
now.
on that tool. But also just reaching out to people like myself. Like there are a ton of people who work at Adobe and they're all super passionate about like helping people figure out how to best express themselves. And so if there's something that's like there's a feature hidden that you want to know if it exists or not or where to find it, like just ping me and we'll figure it out. That's the stuff that makes me super proud to work at Adobe. Is like I'm not special in that regard, where everybody who works at Adobe seems to want to just help everybody else learn where to find the thing to do the stuff that they feel like doing.
Yeah, no.
And that's why I feel like
cool.
you being here today is amazing, because even your job in general is amazing because you're helping creators find the tools that they need to make their vision, their creative aspect, whatever they're trying to do, come to life.
Yeah,
And that's really the hardest thing when it comes to editing,
Mhm.
or even working on any of these platforms, is just trying to find the tools that you need to make what you're trying to do
Mhm.
come to life. Even you guys with your website.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
what do I need for my website to make my website come to life? Now you know.
No, yeah,
You can go in and there's an
100%.
AI feature that helps you come up with a template, and you can get it done in like 2.5 seconds
Yes.
once you already have what you need.
Yeah.
Which
To
I
get
don't
it
know about
going.
you, I will be doing
Oh,
that after
no,
this.
100%. But I also just think about it in terms of what it is, and it's just art. It's just being
Mhm.
creative, being a creative person. You're already in this field. You are immediately touched with.
You are, yeah.
You are not going to make it. There are too many people competing
Says
for your
who?
same job. Exactly. There are too many people competing for your same job. This is such a hard
So
field.
what?
You're not going to make it.
Let them try.
So having that
Come get
energy
it.
of, hey,
Yeah.
That's right.
you think I'm not going to make it.
But
I have no
do,
other choice.
yeah.
I'm going to make myself make it.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this because that's what I care about and that's what I want to do. And having the tools to be able to do it and having it more open, because I feel like the biggest problem with that is people get so afraid of the idea that they won't make it
Okay.
that they end up not. They don't pursue what they actually want to do because of how much fear they have.
Yeah.
So when you make it open and you make it free, like you don't have to figure it out. You just do. Start little, start small, do something, be creative, go to Premiere, just start messing around
Just
with
start
stuff,
messing around.
click buttons, like little things like that. It makes people more interested in what they want to do, and it helps people make it.
Yeah.
So it's really important. It honestly does mean a lot. I know to us two specifically, because we do want to do film.
Yes.
We do
You
want
guys
to do
are
these
doing film. I
things.
watched
Yeah.
one of your films just now. Like you
Yeah.
guys are doing it. And I think the thing about my job that I love the most is like most of the time it's not showing people how to do stuff. It's validating the work that they're already doing.
Mhm.
That's the sort of stuff that I'm super passionate about, because nobody's trying to hire me in Rochester to do anything creative, and it turns out I could do it this whole time, and I was doing it. And so whenever I see people go, oh well, I'm not really an X and Y, or I'm not really an A and B. It's like, you're doing X and Y, you're doing A and B. Like you absolutely are. One thing I always told myself was like, why not me? Like somebody's got to be the person who went from downloading Creative Cloud for the first time to working for Adobe in 4 years. Why
Right.
not me?
Yeah.
Why not me?
100%.
And I'll let you tell me why, as opposed to me telling myself why. And so I just kind of go for things. If I don't make it, it won't be for lack of effort. I'm going to give this 110%, and then as soon as I step off stage, I'll ask you how I can give a little bit more, so I could give 120% the next time around. And you'd be shocked at how far that mentality gets you. Like, there are so many people who can't wait to tell you no. I just refuse to step in that line and be one of them. Like you guys are already doing the work. And when you see like how taped together some people's workflows are, like one thing that I always found so funny is like some of my favorite scenes in like Star Wars were shot in like a parking lot. It's like some guy was like holding up tape, with like a canvas background, and somebody else was like using a stick to prop up the light. It's like this moment that I've taken so much inspiration from barely happened.
Yeah.
Like you'd be shocked at like just kind of what goes into making the final product. And so if all that sort of jerry rigging can lead to such like an inspirational touch point, then what I'm doing can't be that bad. Like I'm trying to do it the best way possible. And it doesn't matter how I tape these things together. It's like, what happens when you watch what I've done, rather than, how did I go about making it?
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to touch base again on what you were talking about, just bringing what many consider diverse ideas.
Yeah.
Did you meet any controversy like bringing in the culture into what you guys
Tons
do at
all the
Adobe?
time. Yeah. Not at Adobe, but tons all the time. Like when I give presentations, there are some people who, they'll sit with their arms crossed and they're looking at you like, it should be them up there. And some of that's just inherent to the role. Some of that's just inherent to how short it's been since I've started. But I always try to compare, like, I started, my day one was where a lot of people hope to take their careers to 10 years down the line. Where the very first collaboration I did was with design, was with a sports apparel brand, and working with the number 2 CrossFit athlete in the world to design a pair of shorts. So like I had complete creative direction over that whole entire project from start to finish. And I think a lot of designers hope to get their career there, but that was literally the first project I had. The first video project I had was with Adobe. Like a lot of videographers hope to get there at some point, and that was my day one. So I was kind of on the accelerated track. whatsoever. But when it comes to like how I plate things and how I go about talking about stuff, I've always been really intentionally defiant in that way. I'll give you an example. Like for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I always have imagery that's really challenging, because I think it's one thing to plaster a quote from him onto something. It's another thing to know why we're quoting him in the first place.
Right.
And I think that we advertising in a lot of ways can try to divorce those two things and kind of make that like almost abstract. Like we just kind of all worship at the altar of this person just because. But no, like let's look at a picture of people holding up burning crucifixes outside of his house, and let's look at pictures of him in the hospital getting stitches because he got stabbed while doing a march. And I'll post that on LinkedIn and see how it goes. And I think that sort of voice it's appreciated by the people who I want it to be appreciated to. I'll put it that way. And then everybody else, I'm really not too concerned with. But it does come with its own bag of goodies, unfortunately. But those are the sort of things where it's like I'll take it on the chin, because I think that stuff's important.
Standing for what you believe in.
Yeah, and doing so authentically and not in a way that's contrived. Like I'm not doing it to be shocking. I'm doing it because if we just keep quoting this person without like really stopping and going, okay, like what did this person endure for him to be such an important figure? I don't want to lose that, if that makes any sense. And I think that sometimes certain marketing firms would sprint to forget all of that stuff. And it's like, well, if it's just me out here, then I'm gonna be a little reminder.
You're educating your audience, educating your audience, which I think is so important.
Yeah,
Crucial.
I appreciate it. Yeah, and just I've always had a very me tone, for better or worse. Like if you see a poster of me, like instantly that it was me who made it. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned WBO champion, CrossFit. Who are some of the coolest people you've ever worked with?
Oh, so this is I kind of met all my heroes already through just fighting. So like Willie Monroe Jr., shout out to him. He's a great friend of mine, and he's from Rochester, New York as well, and a fellow boxer. And I had come to boxing after doing MMA, and so I was like, okay, like I fight MMA, I'll be fine doing boxing. And the very first time I went boxing, I got beat up so bad. I got beat up so bad that some old man came up to me. He goes, "Hey, what that guy did to you was awful. Let me show you some things." And that old guy beat me up. And then after that old guy beat me up, it turns out they were father and son. I got beat up by the family tree. And then Willie Monroe Jr. was there. Yeah, the whole family tree got their licks in that day. Yeah, I got beat up from top to bottom. It was a generational whooping.
That is actually
generational whooping.
Yeah, it was bad.
Add
Yeah.
that to the dictionary,
And then
please.
Willie Monroe took to me because he saw me getting bounced around like that every day for months on end, and then finally was generous enough to work with me. And so we kind of developed the friendship through that. And then when it came time to launch my own brand, he was the first person I called up. It was like, "Hey, I think I'm going to give this a shot and do this on my own." And he goes, "Man, like I know if you're doing it, you're going to figure it out." Because he kind of seen me pick myself back up off the canvas enough times to know that if I was going for something, I was going for something. So he's one of the ones who I got to work with. The number 2 heavyweight champion of the world for jiu-jitsu, ADCC champion, Mateus Danish. He's the guy who's got to work with a few times. I've got to train with him at Marcelo Garcia's. It's like when you're rolling with him, it's like somebody throws you into a dryer. It's like the weirdest feeling.
Wow.
Where like I don't know where. Like it's just it's a different thing.
You're
like,
definitely a poet.
yeah,
Definitely a poet.
it's a very visceral, like I don't know where I'm at sort of feeling, but he's so kind. And if you train with Brazilians, it's like the weirdest dynamic, because like for 6 minutes they're like out for your life, and afterwards they're like kissing you on the forehead, and you're like delirious. You're like, "Oh, I'm like muito bem," and so like that sort of dynamic is always really fun. Working with Mateus is awesome. Working with Very Hard to Submit, the brand that sponsored him, is great. Working with Jacob Hepner is awesome. There's a lot of people who I've got to work with, but it's usually just like what the dynamic is that they bring. Like I could care less about like your visibility. It's like, who are you as like a person that has always stood out to me. And so yeah, like the people who really stick out are the ones where it's like, man, like not only do they have like a superhuman ability, they also are the coolest people, outside of that. And we'll talk to little old me of all folks, about whatever it is that I've got in my mind. So that's the stuff that stands out.
That's awesome. Any more questions?
I have a couple, just like random questions.
yeah.
So I see your tattoos, and they're really, really nice.
Oh, thank you.
I was wondering what they mean. Do you have any special like?
Yeah,
interpretations
so
for them?
my wife, she's super fierce, and so her nickname is like Katie Bear,
Mhm.
and so I got a bear on me because that just reminds me of my wife.
Mhm.
This one's a drummer because I've been playing since I was like 4 or 5 years old. Actually, the very first drum set I played, there's a drummer named Steve Gadd, who's played for everybody if you Google him. And his son was in my class when I was in school, and so he brought his drum kit in when I was in kindergarten. I sat in his lap and played. And to this day, I remember that feeling like, yo. And so that was something that was really meaningful to me. I've got my jujitsu gi size tattooed right here just to kind of keep me in shape. Because if I go over that size, I'd have to change the number from A3 to A4. I've got my lucky number right here, 117. My best friends and I, we all played Halo together growing up, like a bunch of greasy nerds. And so we all got like the number from Halo tattooed here. And I'm trying to think, I don't think I have any others. I want to get one for my daughter soon, but I haven't figured out what that thing is yet. She told us what she's like 2.5. And she finally said like the very first thing that she said that she liked ever. This is true. She goes, I like French fries. I was like, I like
So
French
real.
fries. Yeah.
Really real.
Yeah. She's
Smart one,
She's like,
smart
I
one.
like French fries. I'm like, yeah, Dad loves French fries.
So you have to get fries. Is what
Yeah.
I'm hearing.
Well, we get French fries all the time. Like, cause she'll go to dance class, and at first she hated it. So I go, okay, if we go to dance, we'll get French fries. And so now, whenever we get in the car, she goes, French fries. It's like, oh shoot, okay, fine, we'll go get French fries.
She's valid. She's
Yeah.
valid for that. What are your biggest inspirations as forms of like media, as different shows, different movies? What inspires the work that you do?
Honestly, I'm not just saying this. It's what you guys are already doing. Just coming into classroom and seeing a bunch of faces with skin tones like mine, with all the knowledge that I wish I had. Even now, like there are ways where you guys are genuinely like I'll be asking you questions, like even how you guys seamlessly got this setup going. Like this is stuff that I don't know how to do. And so seeing that you guys are so informed and so geared up and so inspired, it's like, man, like no matter what my career turns into, where you guys are going to take this industry, it's in good hands already. So it's like, I feel like there's no pressure on me really, like the work's already done, like you guys are all set. So now I just kind of get to sit back and enjoy, you guys take this in whatever direction you guys take it. And if there's anything I can offer in terms of like, just, here's some doorways I bump my head on. Hopefully you guys don't have to bump your head on the same thing. I'm more than happy to be as transparent about that stuff as possible. Like I've made every mistake, even in the short amount of time when it comes to like networking and putting yourself out there. And, once you get the job, that's a whole different can of worms as well. And I'm learning that in real time. So, but it's in terms of like skill set and inspiration, like I just watching your video, it makes me so happy to see like, oh my God, like here's this gifted young woman who's actually got an outlet for the thing that she loves, like, and it's so polished and she's going to school for it. So it's like, man, like I'm so moved by that. Like I'll carry that with me for the rest of my career.
Uh-oh,
Thank
now
you
Miss
so much.
Cabrera
I'll
getting
carry-
emotional.
I'll carry
Now
you
Miss
with me.
Cabrera getting emotional.
That's amazing. Shout out, Maddie. Ladies and gentlemen, that's probably gonna do it for this one. Another amazing interview in the bag. I just want to shout out Audio and Switcher, Caden. I didn't see you there earlier, brother. Thank you very much for helping back there. Thank you very much, Ms. Cabrera, Mr. Reaves, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Have a good one.
Bye bye.
Bye.